What if I told you that a few companies you've probably never heard of quietly control the movement of almost everything you own? Not Apple, not Amazon, not any brand you'd recognize. A silent empire operating in the background of the global economy, deciding what arrives, when it arrives, and what you pay for it. And here's the part most people never realize. These companies stopped truly competing with each other years ago. Instead, they formed alliances so powerful, they now control over 80% of global trade. This is the hidden infrastructure most people never think about. And once you see how it works, you'll never look at a price tag the same way again. Look around the room you're in right now. The phone in your hand, the clothes on your back, the coffee on your desk. Every single one of those things made a long journey across an ocean to reach you. But what if that journey was controlled by just a handful of companies, making coordinated decisions in boardrooms you'll never see? They don't just move goods, they control timing, pricing, availability, and sometimes entire economies. This is the story of how they quietly took control and what it means for every single one of us. So, how did we get here? It started with a simple metal box. Before the 1950s, loading a ship was chaotic, expensive, and painfully slow. Goods of every shape and size were packed into barrels, crates, and sacks, loaded one by armies of dock workers. A logistical nightmare that made global trade slow and prohibitively expensive. Then came the revolution, a standardized, stackable, lockable metal container. That single invention transformed global trade from a complex art into a streamlined science. Goods could be packed at a factory, sealed in a container, and moved by truck, train, and ship to their final destination without ever being touched. Costs collapsed. Efficiency exploded. It became genuinely cheap to manufacture something on one side of the planet and sell it on the other. And as global trade exploded, so did the ships carrying it. We entered an age of giants. But this revolution that made everything cheaper also made everything fragile. And that fragility starts with what happened next. Because here's what the container revolution actually created: a brutal and unsustainable price war. The container shipping industry became a victim of its own success. It was enormously expensive to build and operate these massive ships. Yet, competition was ferocious. Dozens of companies fighting for the exact same routes, constantly undercutting each other on shipping rates, pushing profits down to almost nothing. Imagine running an airline where you have to fly a giant plane, but you can only sell the tickets for pocket change because 10 other airlines are flying the exact same route at the exact same time. It was a race to the bottom. Many companies simply couldn't survive. The industry was bleeding money, and it desperately needed a solution. But the real story begins when competition became so unsustainable that the only logical move was to stop competing altogether. Instead of destroying each other financially, the shipping giants decided to cooperate. They formed powerful groups called ocean alliances. Think of them like a group chat for the shipping industry, except instead of sharing memes, they share entire fleets of multi-billion-dollar vessels. These alliances let member companies pool their ships, coordinate schedules, and share space on each other's vessels, optimizing capacity, reducing costs, and offering more reliable services without directly fighting over prices. And here's where the scale of what happened becomes genuinely staggering. As of early 2026, just 3 mega alliances, along with one independent giant, control over 80% of the entire global container market. 4 entities, 80% of everything. Be honest, did you know any of this was happening? The first is the Ocean Alliance, the largest, including France's CMA-CGM and China's COSCO Group, a dominant force on the critical routes connecting Asia, North America, and Europe. Next is the Gemini Cooperation, formed in 2025 between Germany's Hapag-Lloyd and Danish Titan Maersk, targeting unprecedented schedule reliability for businesses that need goods to arrive on time. This alliance was born after the dissolution of previous agreements, showing just how calculated these partnerships can be. Then there's the Premier Alliance, HMM, Ocean Network Express, and Yang Ming, revamping their network to deliver stable services on the major east-west trade lanes. And finally, MSC, the Mediterranean Shipping Company, operating independently with a market share of over 20% on its own. One company, no partners needed, no alliance required, just pure scale that makes MSC a dominant force entirely by itself. 4 entities controlling the movement of the modern world, but these alliances became even more powerful for another reason entirely, because of where they operate. Global trade doesn't flow freely across open ocean. It funnels through narrow straits and man-made canals, strategic choke points where the entire system becomes dangerously vulnerable. And this is where the hidden mechanics of global shipping get genuinely unsettling. 2 choke points matter more than any others: the Suez Canal in Egypt connecting Asia and Europe, and the Panama Canal connecting the Atlantic and Pacific. The Suez Canal is the lifeline between continents. For a ship traveling from Shanghai to Rotterdam, it shaves weeks and thousands of miles off the journey, compared to sailing all the way around Africa. The alliances depend on it completely. But this choke point is incredibly fragile, and we all saw exactly how fragile in 2021. A single ship, the Ever Given, wedged sideways across the Suez Canal, 6 days stuck. $10 billion of global trade stopped every single day. Factories halted production. Store shelves started emptying. Car prices surged worldwide. The cost of furniture, electronics, and everyday goods spiked for months afterward. And millions of people paid higher prices without ever knowing why. One blockage, one ship, a domino effect that rippled through the entire global economy for over a year. That single moment exposed the terrifying truth. We built a system of extraordinary efficiency and extraordinary vulnerability at the same time. But the alliances themselves weren't the biggest threat to global trade. The oceans were. Since late 2023, attacks on vessels in the Red Sea forced most major carriers to avoid the Suez route entirely, rerouting ships all the way around Africa, adding weeks to journeys and billions to costs. Those costs moved down the supply chain from manufacturers to retailers to you at the checkout. By early 2026, some services are cautiously returning. The Gemini Cooperation began reinstating routes through the Suez with naval assistance, a significant step toward normalization. But traffic remains well below historical levels, and the situation stays fragile. And then climate change created a problem no shipping company could fully control. The Panama Canal relies on fresh water from Gatun Lake to operate its locks. A severe drought beginning in 2023 dropped water levels to dangerously low levels, forcing drastic restrictions on the number of ships passing through each day. Improved rainfall in 2025 allowed partial recovery, but transits never returned to pre-drought levels. The world's most important shortcut is now at the mercy of the weather, and every time it rains less than expected in Panama, prices rise in places thousands of miles away. So a handful of companies control the ships and the routes. But why does this matter to you personally? Next time prices rise unexpectedly at your local store, you'll know exactly which boardroom and which choke point the decision came from. First, it directly affects the price of almost everything you buy. When alliances reroute ships around Africa to avoid the Red Sea, journeys get longer. Fuel costs rise, insurance premiums spike. Those costs move down the chain, from manufacturer to retailer to you. Second, it determines what's actually available. The Ever Given blockage proved that one failure creates a domino effect cascading through the entire system. When alliances control capacity so completely, even a small disruption, a blockage, a port strike, a geopolitical crisis, hits globally and immediately. Third, their decisions shape entire economies. By choosing which ports receive their largest vessels, these alliances can turn a local port into a major international hub or leave it behind entirely. They set the rhythm of global trade. They decide which cities grow and which ones get bypassed. The hidden mechanics of our world are extraordinary. A metal box invented in the 1950s, a brutal price war that nearly destroyed an industry, a quiet decision to cooperate instead of compete, and now a system so efficient and so concentrated that a drought in Panama or an attack in the Red Sea can empty shelves in your local store within weeks. Modern civilization runs on a supply chain most people never think about. controlled by a handful of companies most people have never heard of. Sailing through choke points most people couldn't locate on a map. We built the most efficient system of moving goods in human history, and we made it dependent on everything going right. The question worth asking isn't how this system works. You know that now. The question is, what happens when it breaks?